welcome to the October podcast for the Yorkshire EV Club. I'm Darren.
And I'm Ivan.
And today it is the 28th, and we have been to the Sherburn Aero Club, and that was a good meeting, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was quite a few people there, even though the weather hasn't been very kind to us.
We a bunch of us had a tour around all the planes, and of course the poor guide was besieged with people saying, "When are you getting electric planes here?" and his answer was they are trialing unleaded fuel that doesn't leave any nasties in the atmosphere, and it's working quite well. So that's the first step, and I think they are playing about with an electric plane there, he said.
Yeah, and which actually leads us into our first thing. Cattle, the big battery manufacturer, has actually made a battery which has got a specific power to weight of 500 watts per kilogram, which means the batteries can be a lot smaller and a lot lighter. In comparison, you get about 240 to 250 for the current battery technology. So, I mean, that's absolutely amazing. If you can get that in a car, your car will be, the battery pack will be half the weight. So
it just goes to show that all this research over the years, and I know things take a long time to come out and we all get impatient, but all this research definitely pays off. I guess the question is, are people going to have EVs with twice the range, something most of us EV drivers know is not needed, or we're just going to have lighter EVs?
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, we had one of the people that were interested in EVs come up to us today and say, he was speaking to Kevin, one of the other admins, and Kevin was chatting to him, and he turned around and went, "Well, I'd never buy an EV," and he was like, "Well, you're here, aren't you?" And he said, "Yeah, but it won't do 300 miles." So I spoke to him and said, you do 300 miles, obviously. Do you take a break? And he proceeded to turn around and say, "No." I said, "Well, you're quite dangerous on the road, and I wouldn't want to be on the same piece of road that you're on." So, yeah, it's just the mentality of some people, unfortunately. It's still pretty much back in the olden days where if a car can't do 500, 600 miles, they're not going to buy it.
Speaking as a middle-aged man, and we've been over this one many times, but it's true. After 100 miles, my bladder tells me I'm not quite comfortable. Let's have a little stop. Let's have a comfort break. And I think you're fresher for it anyway.
Absolutely. And even myself, I still drive a fossil fuel car while I'm waiting for to buy another electric car, because we've got one already in the household. But even a 200-mile journey, I have to stop for a good 15-20 minutes for a break, for a stretch, to freshen up. It's not nice sitting behind the wheel for more than 100 miles. Yeah, and
I personally don't believe anyone who says that. Anyone that would drive 400 miles without a break is a danger to other road users. I mean, we all have a lapse in concentration over long periods of time, and having a break sort of stopped that. And as I say, old and tired arguments we've all heard before, and let's move them on to something more practical.
Yeah, I don't know whether, Darren, you're like myself. You'll be driving along and suddenly you'll realise that you're a mile down the road, and if someone turned around to me and said, What did you pass 300 yards down the road? I couldn't tell you, because you got into such a you're in such a zone that you kind of zoned out, and at that point it's like, actually, I think I better have a break. So
yeah, absolutely, and it's just like I say, we see the same tired old arguments, and the average UK journey, I think, is less than 20 miles a day, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And what's better than waking up in the morning and getting into your car? It's all nice and toasty if you're during the winter, or nice and cool during the summer, and then having a full battery. I mean, what? Show me a petrol car that can fill up at home,
Yeah, and I haven't bought a scraper or a tin of WD-40 for a number of years now.
yeah, definitely, yeah. Anyway, so we're going to our first lot of stories now.
Okay, so we'll start with a news story because it's a pretty big one and has affected the EV world. Everyone's been talking about it. And it's the Luton Airport fire at Terminal 2. It's not old news, but I'll just recap. 15 fire engines and more than 100 firefighters attended the fire, and it decimated the car park in Terminal 2. And literally immediately, before anyone knew a fact, everyone was blaming that it was an EV fire.
Yeah, well, and I believe it was actually, obviously it was a fossil fuel, but it was a hybrid. I think it was a hybrid Range Rover or something.
Yeah,
like that.
The point was it wasn't a full EV.
Yeah.
And immediately the press, everyone was speculating. And I'll go back to the tired old argument, which is a phrase I'll be using a lot during this podcast. But which is more dangerous, a heavily shielded battery or a car full of volatile fluid?
Which is in a plastic container, effectively.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people talk about EV fires, and they are a problem in as much as when there is a fire in an EV, it is traditionally said to be more difficult to tackle. But they are finding new innovations and new ways. I believe that there's some sort of blanket now that they put over that stifles it of oxygen completely.
Yeah, correct, yeah. And in fact, I was watching a YouTube channel the other day, and I've got some stats actually which puts it into perspective. And we're not talking about stats from a Mickey Mouse company like I don't know, Joe's Autos down the road. We're talking about Lex Auto Lease and also Tusker, so pretty big companies. Lex Auto Lease have 165,000 electric vehicles that they maintain, look after. And none of them are caught fire, believe it or not. How about that?
That just goes to show how safe they are, doesn't it?
Yeah. And another stat from Tusker. So they have 32,000 cars. 23 of those are full electric. And the rest are made up, the other 9,000 are made up of hybrids, diesels and petrols. And apparently, and a little known stat again, the petrol cars and the diesel cars were 5 times more likely to run out of fuel than the electric cars were run out of go-go juice like battery juice. So how does that work? We've been told differently.
I think it just goes to show really people who are new to EVs and people who have had them for a while have all had one thing drummed into them. They're driving a vehicle with, to a degree, a limited range, and they know for a fact that there is a possibility. There's limited places to charge. We all know that's changing. We all know the convenience of having an EV parking and charging at home, but generally I think EV drivers are more cautious when it comes to making sure they don't run out of fuel. And I think an EV that's well managed is much less likely to leave you by the side of the road than an old ICE vehicle with a dodgy fuel gauge.
Yeah, and what the other thing that I also noted on it is, it's like EVs, they give you one warning, they give you another warning, they give you multiple warnings, and then eventually they say the battery's dead. And it's like, yeah, I've had several warnings, whereas, from experience in an ICE car, when it's running low on fuel, you just get a bong and you get a light on the dashboard, and that's it. You don't get constantly pestered. So, if anything, EVs are more, they pester you more to say, look, you need to really refuel. So it's one of those things.
So yeah, just to pull it back to Luton. All I'll say to anyone out there that's even remotely impartial, don't listen to the press. Find the facts out for yourself with these news stories. There's so many people out there with an agenda. We need to know what the facts are before we make snap judgments. And I think I will leave it there. That's about all we need to cover for the EV aspect of the old Luton Airport fire.
Right, so what I'd like to do now, Darren, is talk a little bit about renewables, if that's okay. So I found out some interesting stats, and I couldn't believe this when I heard it, and I've subsequently done some more research on this. And this stat was from the American Energy Transmission Committee. And apparently, over the next 30 years of rebuilding or creating renewables, so solar, wind, etc., basically that's going to put out as much CO2 as equivalent of 6 months worth of fossil fuels creating electricity, believe it or not, which is, I think, absolutely staggering.
Yeah, and it just goes to show what guff has been talked about renewables. I mean, if you think of a renewable energy like an EV, it's got something in common in that relatively few moving parts. No moving parts in the case of a solar panel.
Yeah, absolutely.
A wind turbine is pretty much a gearbox and a blade. And these things last, don't they? So whatever it takes to make them, they last long enough and produce clean enough.
Yeah, and the other big argument is wind turbine blades are not recyclable. Well, that's been put to bed because there's now a company that actually can break them down using a chemical process, and also they have been known to be placed into concrete to provide reinforcement. So
yeah, but generally it's carbon fibre, isn't it? I don't think that's the nastiest of substance. It's just a case of learning how to deal with something that large, I suppose, isn't it? And another one that's annoyed me, particularly this Tory cabinet that seems to be anti-renewable, and obviously we won't get too much into politics, but we all know where Rishi Sunak's wife has a lot of her money, and it certainly isn't in the renewable sector. So the likes of Liz Truss and other Conservative Party members, they were banging on about how much these solar panels you see in the fields, all British farmland, how much room it takes up. Firstly, everyone knows that those fields also allow the growth of wildflowers and for sheep to graze quite happily next to a solar panel. They won't suddenly be zapped like in Star Trek. But the key point here is that ground-mounted solar panels, the farmers with spare land are happy to put them on there, probably get free energy as a result of it, but they take up just 0.1% of all land in the UK.
0.1? I thought it was like, a good 20 to 30% by the sound of it by the government.
0.1%. And again, simple thing that can last for years, needs a bit of a clean now and again, doesn't emit toxins. It doesn't take a truck to take fuel to it like it does a coal reactor or anything like that. So just think of that. And so as for subsidies, like I say, just do your own research into how much subsidies have gone into the fossil fuel industries. And when they say they're going to build new oil rigs and stuff like that, we don't immediately benefit from that. The oil they produce goes on to open market to the highest bidder. So again, get knowledgeable and don't let these people lie to you.
Yeah, and actually, that's a good bit of a good segue when you're talking about Rishi Sunak. We all, I think we're all pretty aware of the news that he's come out with in the past month, that he's pushing the fossil fuel ban back to 2035. I can't help but think that's the Conservatives, and again, I don't want to get political, but the Conservatives clutching at straws to try and win votes. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being a bit cynical. I don't know. What do you think, Darren? At
this stage, they seem to be pandering to the lowest common denominator with their emphasis on immigration and things like that. And again, it's not really a subject for this podcast, but when you look at it, I think we'd all agree where immigrants are housed is not the problem. How they're handled as people when they come into this country is what needs to be looked at.
Yeah, I think it's just, personally, as I say, I think it's just a political vote, or they're trying to get the people that are essentially what they call working class, and that's another source of a podcast maybe I've certainly heard. They're trying to get them on side. We know that the Conservatives, well, I know certainly the Conservatives, in my opinion, is that they're in it for the rich. It's pretty easy to see that, but maybe we've got other podcast listeners that have a difference of opinion. We'd like to hear them.
Yeah, I just think it's distraction politics. If you're looking at the small boats, then you're not looking at where's all the money from the PPE contracts gone, etc., etc. But we'll leave that there and we'll move on to other subjects. So you turned up an interesting story that hadn't yet crossed my radar about one of the larger newspapers was, shall we say, grabbing hold of YouTubers' stories and misrepresenting them slightly?
Yeah, glad you mentioned that, actually. So I followed this website on YouTube or podcast, electrifying.com. So it's got like Ginny Buckley, Nikki Shields, and a few others, and they were having a YouTube discussion, a remote discussion, and what had happened was the Sun had essentially just plagiarised a lot of their work. So this lady was doing a review on a car. Let's say the car was a Kona, for example, and as with most impartial journalists, they give you a good side and they give you a bad side. What's good on the car, what's bad on the car. And what the Sun had done is essentially taken all the bad parts out of that video and mashed them together in one complete video and then taken them off of YouTube. So apparently Jeannie Buckley went back to the Sun and she's got a person there who's quite high up and she mentioned it, and after mentioning it, the Sun have now pulled the story. However, she's not the only one who's been partial to this plagiarism by the Sun. So, Transport Evolved, you've heard of them?
Oh, yeah. They've been around a long time. Very well-respected EV journalists, yeah. Yeah,
so Nikki from there mentioned that they had their video stolen off of YouTube and remixed and downloaded onto the Sun website. And have you also heard of Tesla Bjorn?
Oh, yeah, who hasn't? Yeah. The banana box man.
Yeah, the banana box man, yeah. He too has had a number of videos basically taken off YouTube, mashed together to make EVs look bad. It's just getting ridiculous. I mean, who would think that the Sun had you'd think that the Sun would have some kind of motivation? I mean, what do you think, Darren?
Well, let's see. Just ask yourselves this question without me being too obvious about it. Who owns it? Who funds it? We all know what kind of pies media moguls have their money in, and how did people used to get their money? Which industry did the super rich get much of their money from? And rhymes with coil.
Yeah, and the person who owns the Sun's last name is Murdoch, so you don't have to really do a lot of research to find out who it is and realise what the kind of thing that they're trying to get or do to the EV industry.
You know what it says to me? If they're willing to sink this low, we must be winning, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I was speaking to Darren earlier about Richard Simon's EV, RSEV. He's got a YouTube channel. He's quite impartial. I mean, he's a self-professed petrol head. And he was saying, actually, his business hasn't been doing too badly during this EV boom. In fact, he's brought out a list of videos or a load of videos that have shown you behind the scenes. And they're having to buy cars weekly, and they've got waiting lists for their EVs. So
I can believe it. I mean, I was just driving up the motorway just today to come and see you and attend the meeting, the EV Club meeting, and the amount of EVs that pass me now, and I just think, when I bought my first Leaf in 2015, There's literally nothing else on the road other than a few other Leafs and the odd old Tesla Model S. But now it's like, it seems like every third car's an EV, and it's great. We're winning, folks.
Yeah, so, you don't have to shout too loud when you're winning, but unfortunately, because the big old companies are now losing the fight against EVs, well, in my opinion anyway, at least, they're having to start to dig out stuff and make up stories and, just basically trying to pull the wool over everyone's eyes. If they can do it, they'll do it.
And if anyone out there wants to trust the sun for even a moment, just ask yourself why the entire city of Liverpool will not buy a single copy of that rag. And we'll leave that there.
So, anyway, this brings us on to our next part we want to cover. So, Yorkshire EV, as we recording this, has just had a meeting at the aerodrome, the Sherburn Aerodrome, as Darren mentioned at the first. Our next meeting is Saturday, the 25th of November, between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m, and that is for Maxus York, and their address is Unit 20, Laverack's Industrial Estate, Elvington, York, YO41 4ER, and the what three words are waddle, joke, and twinkled. So let's have a good turnout for them, and basically we're going to have a look around their various vans that they brought out, because they're known for their vans, and also the first pickup that was delivered or created for the UK market, the T90. So there are going to be lots of vehicles there to potentially look at.
That is going to be our last meeting before Christmas, folks. So if you really want to get yourself looking at a bunch of EVs, it's probably one of the last chances this year you'll have to attend our meetings. And massive thanks to all of those that organised the meetings, Richard, Paul, in particular, but just all the other admins that always attend regularly. That would be Ian, Kevin, lots and lots of people.
Yeah.
Nicola, sorry, my brain stopped working for a second. Obviously, Nicola as well.
And Craig as well, yeah.
And so we're just going to have a little bit of waffle about EVs generally. I mean, one thing that impressed me today, Ivan, was I saw a Genesis today. What did you say the model number?
Yeah, the GV60. Yeah, it's I think they're the kind of brand, the flagship brand of Hyundai, I believe, or Hyundai, however you pronounce it.
But honestly, folks, this thing had beautifully stitched white leather and some kind of crystal thing in the dash. What was that? I don't know what that was.
Apparently that's the gear selector. So when you start the car up, the gear selector spins over 180 degrees. It's all very fancy.
But I mean, just from an ignoramus's point of view, i.e. mine, it's a beautiful car, absolutely stunning. Looks so comfort. I think I said to someone, I could live in this. It's so good looking.
Yeah, apparently somebody was saying that the GV60 is built on the same platform as the Ioniq 5, and you can kind of see that because both cars are very wide, and they almost look like a car that you've got in Photoshop and you've increased it by 125%. It just looks oddly large.
I thought the logo reminded me a bit of the old Bentley logo as well.
Yeah,
like the sort of wings surrounding the name.
Yeah, but a very, very nice piece of kit, and they've only just came out. I think they've been over here for about 6 or 7 months, but absolutely gorgeous cars.
Yeah, I must admit, I wouldn't mind getting behind the wheel of one of those and maybe selling a kidney and seeing if I can afford one.
Yeah, and Kevin, one of our other fellow members, turned up in a Mackie, the 4-wheel drive one, and he was absolutely praising it. I think he was interested originally at the Model Y, but I think he's been converted by the Ford Mackie X, I think it's called.
I get that. I sat in it. I sat in the driver's seat, and very much like the old bucket seat style, but the screen in the thing is probably bigger than a Tesla screen.
Yeah, and they've got that button I don't know if you saw it in the screen, but there's a button banging the bottom centre of the screen. It's like they've made the screen around this button, and it's the same apparently, or what I've seen, as the Ford F-150. There's almost like a radio button in the centre.
Yeah, it looked like it magnified as well. Whatever it was displaying, like the magnification too. A great looking car, folks. I must admit, I thought it was a good looking vehicle.
Yeah, and the only thing that let it down, in my opinion, was the size of the boot. Did Kevin open up the boot and show you?
I only got to see it at the front.
Yeah, it was. It's quite deep and quite wide because of the size of the car, but unfortunately, the boot floor lid is almost as tall as the back beam that goes across the door, and apparently the MG5 EV has a slightly bigger boot than the Mach-E, but the Mach-E's a much bigger car.
Yeah, it's funny how that design space makes a difference, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it might have been something to do with the Mach-E X is the 4-wheel drive version, so I'm assuming that there's a dirty great electric motor sitting under the boot floor somewhere there. I don't know why, because Tesla, even with the 4-wheel drive Model Y, I think it is, they've got a really deep boot floor in there.
But yeah, I mean, EVs are just getting more innovative, bigger, and we're just getting such a great range of options now. I remember when it was just Leaf or Zoe, or if you had a bit of money, Tesla Model S.
Yeah. And funny enough, Bjorn Nyland's just got hold of his old Tesla Model S, and it's now sitting at 390,000 kilometres. It's on its second battery, but the only reason for that is because apparently the first one had an issue, but this second one, he's had it in there for 290,000 miles, and it's degraded, but not as much as the.
Well, anything would degrade over that period of wear and tear. But hang on a minute, what about all the naysayers who are saying, EVs will only last 2 years and then they'll be in landfill?
Yeah, absolutely ridiculous, and we all know it's ridiculous because the price of what they call, I think it's black material that you get when you crush a EV battery up, it's something like $2,000 per tonne. It's ridiculous. So if you guys know of any EVs that are on their last legs, do write into the club, and we'll happily take them off your hands and have the battery out of them.
Yeah, and like I say, when the battery goes, they can be used for home storage, slow fill, slow depletion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just shows you how important batteries are nowadays, that most of the grid-tied systems, or not grid-tied systems, but the solar farms and the wind farms are now going for big batteries from the likes of Tesla and BYD. So they've got their second and third uses. So I don't think it's actually ever going to be a problem. It was very much, nobody really knew what was happening once the EVs were reached their end of life, or the batteries did, and now it's like they've been given a second and third life, and even after that the raw materials in them are still being recycled, and apparently the raw materials are actually better second time round, I've been told.
Yeah, that makes a kind of sense to me. So hope you've enjoyed listening to this, folks. We'll try and bring you a diverse range of content, and we'll try and keep you abreast of what's going on with the club. Any questions or anything, you can catch the club channels obviously on Twitter and on Facebook. We have a very active presence on Facebook, and we now have 1,700 members.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 1,700.
So yeah, please feel free to join us. We're quite easy to find. Just look for the Yorkshire EV Club, and have a good day, folks.
Thanks a lot. Bye.